Welcome back to Ride JBI. I'm JB. Today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about our Colorado single track settings that we have been developing over the past about 10 years or so. The suspension I have to the left of me is the WP Explorer Pro 8946 shock. This will be mounted to the 2025 KTM 300 XCW Factory Edition. If you know that bike, then you know that bike already comes with WP cone valve forks. We already built up those forks to our JBI spec. So if you're interested in how we build those, check out our website. We got a lot of deep details on what we do to those forks, why we do it, and what that rider should expect. But the main topic of this video is covering what we did to the shock and why. Because if you've ever ridden in Colorado, you'll know that it has some unique terrain. I spent just over a week there riding in the Taylor Park / Crested Butte area. And while that's not the area everybody rides, it is a pretty common style of terrain that you will find when riding in the Colorado area. So with that in mind, in this video, we're going to break down what type of valving we did to the shock, what type of tires we'd recommend to go with that, and most importantly, what we did, why we did it, and what this rider should expect. So let's begin with the JBI spec mods we did to the shock and why we strongly recommended to this rider to go with this shock over the OEM WP Explorer PDS shock. Now, again, this is the 300 XCW Factory Edition that comes with the cone valve forks. We've spent a lot of time over the past years developing our JBI spec settings for those cone valve forks, and we've gotten to perform at such a high level. We believe that the stock shock, even though if it's revalved and rebuilt, it just cannot keep pace with the forks on that bike. So if you want to have the best balanced bike for that factory edition, we strongly recommend that you go with the WP Explorer Pro 8946 shock. Now, there's a few reasons behind this. Big key reason is the style of piston that's located behind the high-speed compression adjuster. The geometry and piston design of that is very different than what you'd find in the OEM shock. Now, at Ride JBI, we do have our own piston, and we do update that in the OEM shocks, but it's not identical to this style. However, we can definitely capture a lot of that lost performance in the stock shock and make the OEM shock perform as good. But what's nice is this shock already comes with it. Another key area on this shock is look how big the nitrogen tank is. Now, it is bigger in two ways, in the amount of volume that it has inside of it and also the surface area. By that, I mean how much area the oil can interact with the bladder compared to what the stock shock has. Now, this is very important. The more nitrogen volume we have along with surface area means as the shock compresses down, the rate at which this shock is going to build pressure internally is going to be much slower. With the OEM shock, we have a smaller amount of nitrogen and a smaller amount of surface area. So what that means is the rate at which the shock builds up pressure internally is going to be much faster. So think of a much more inclined linear curve. Now, I'm oversimplifying here, but I want to get an intuitive concept across to you so you can understand why. The reason that is important is because for our off-road applications, especially for the slower single track type riding applications that we find in Colorado, you're going to want a very smooth feeling shock. You don't want a shock that is going to ramp up in compression very quickly. This is the PDS style shock. So it does have two pistons inside of it with the top piston on top, which enters a hydraulic bottoming cone to give this shock better bottoming. So some of you may have found that on the stock shock, it can definitely ramp up a little too quick sometimes for those looking for more of a softer off-road style setting. Now let's talk about Colorado. Colorado is known for its very mountainous terrain. And with that, when you're trail riding out there, typically you're either going uphill or downhill. And the style of dirt it has is majority decomposed granite. So if it hasn't rained and it's dry, you're going to be riding on some rather hard dirt. Typically that has a small amount of loose dirt on top of it, which can make it kind of slippery. There also is a fair amount of trees as well. So as you're riding on these trails, when you get into the more shaded areas where there's a heavier density of trees, you're going to encounter a lot more of roots with the rocks as well. And as you know, in the shade, the water tends to collect or stick around longer too. So with that, not only do you have to deal with some dry, hard, slick conditions with rocks, when you get in the shadier spots, it could also still be maybe a little muddy or find some standing water as well. And if you've ridden any sorts of routes before, roots can already be a little challenging, but roots with some water on them, those become even more slick. So at Ride JBI, we have our own Colorado single track spec. Think of that as our flowy single track spec, but softened up just a little bit more. By no means is it as soft as our technical single track spec, but it is softened up a fair bit. If you are doing very technical riding and hard enduro style riding in Colorado, then you would want our technical single track spec. The majority of people riding, though, tend to be in the second and third gear type of speeds and riding the good diversity of terrain that Colorado has. That's why we've spent time coming up with our own Colorado spec. The reason we share this with you is if you followed our videos in the past, you may have taken notice that oftentimes we call out the location of where the rider is based at. Because even though we're located here in California, we're very familiar with the different types of terrain around the United States and around the world. So when it comes time for us to customize our JBI spec settings, there's two key things we want to take into consideration. First and foremost is the rider, their ability, what their suspension preference is, and what they're looking for out of that suspension. Secondly, it's again their location and what's unique about that location in terms of their terrain and geography. As important good suspension is, it's equally as important to have a good tire. Because if your tires aren't gripping up and hooking up well, then you're going to be getting a lot more movement out of your tires than you should, and your suspension is not going to perform as well as it could. Now, if you're like me, I like a tire that tends to last a long time. So in this case, in understanding the diversity of terrain that Colorado has, I would opt for something like a Bridgestone X31. That's kind of a medium to hard pack terrain tire, but it still works well in the soft conditions, and you're going to get some good life out of it. If you like more of a softer feeling tire and just softer rubber, then something like the X20. Now, I get tires are a little topic, so with that in mind, what I'm advising to you is you choose the tire of your choice, but I would aim for something around that medium compound or soft compound for that type of riding. So let's just summarize real quick what we did. We revalved this WP Explorer Pro 8946 shock to our JBI Colorado single track spec. We resprung it just up one rate from the stock rate that is matched to the rider's physique. By that I mean how tall they are and how much they weigh. And then this is going to match perfectly with the JBI spec WP XACT Pro 7548 revalve we did for this rider earlier, aka the cone valve forks. So what they can expect out of this is, compared to the stock shock, this one's going to have a plusher feel on those small and medium bumps. So think of those small to medium baseball sized rocks, maybe even some bigger ones like baby heads, along with the roots that you encounter as well. It's going to have better hold up during that faster paced riding where you're getting in some whoop sections or maybe doing some drop downs. And it'll definitely have some better bottoming resistance as well. So if you're doing even bigger drop downs or maybe jumping off some ledges also. So what this means is, compared to the stock shock, we give this rider a much better overall and improved base shock setting, and one that we're confident is going to pair well with the fork settings we did for him. I know we covered a lot in this video. Anything you want to check out about the JBI specs that we build, you can look up at ridejbi.com. We are very detailed on everything that we do because we feel confident in the more that we share with you, the more you're going to believe that we are the best people to do your suspension.